On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Elmarko Jackson unfortunately will be out for the season after suffering an injury. We talk about the impact on today's episode of the show.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can give me a follow on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, and you can find the show with Locked On Jayhawks anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on this edition, we have a bonus episode, not fun news, as Elmarko Jackson, the soon-to-be sophomore guard for Kansas, suffered an injury during a camp scrimmage and is going to miss the upcoming 2024 to 2025 season. So we're going to talk about that injury, what it means for KU, and what it means for the offseason, as they've already also quickly striked from this and gotten a transfer portal guard in Shakeel Moore. So we'll touch a little bit on that, and then we'll have another episode doing a deep dive on Shakeel Moore. So let's start right here with the news on Elmarko Jackson. They're having the camps going on right now with all the kids and stuff. And basically, to recap, like every day of the camps, the KU basketball players do a scrimmage. And this is not new. This is something they do every year. And honestly, it's an avenue for overreacting to things, which can be fun, but also is not super helpful, because every year there's somebody who performs really well in the scrimmages that it doesn't end up carrying over to anything. And every year there's somebody who performs not very well in the scrimmages and it doesn't carry over because it's not real basketball. Nobody's calling plays, and the players have just been playing with each other for like 3 days and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, point being, it ended up happening that Elmarko Jackson took a spill, and it ended up being they stopped the camp scrimmage from there. Here's what Bill Self had to say earlier today in a press release. On a tweet was sent out. Our thoughts are with Elmarko, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Yesterday, while working out in front of the campers, Elmarko Jackson tore his patellar tendon. An MRI conducted by Kansas Team Health confirmed last night it will require surgery within the next several days, and a full recovery is anticipated. Elmarko will be able to assume non-contact basketball duties in the next several months, but the full rehab process will take approximately 12 months. We are all crushed by this. Elmarko has had a terrific spring. He has worked so hard and has improved so much. This will be a challenge that he will meet head on, and he will return as good as ever. So again, being out for 12 months, if you just fast forward 12 months from basically, we just call it June, would be till next June. So you're out the entirety of the season. This doesn't even leave open for interpretation to say, oh, he's going to be out 8 months. And it's like, okay, well, you could talk himself into being at the latter part of next season. No, this means out for the full season there for Elmarko. I do want to touch on something, because I think this absolutely sucks for Elmarko, and I'll get to why in a second here. I have seen some people talk about like freaking out about why are they even playing these scrimmages? Like, you shouldn't do any of these scrimmages anymore. Can we not do this? Basketball players are going to play basketball. Like, they're going to practice playing basketball. They're going to scrimmage against each other to get better at playing basketball. And because they like playing basketball, they're going to play against each other. They're going to have to practice at some point. They're going to have to scrimmage against each other at some point. Like, you can't avoid every injury. It absolutely sucks that this happens, but we don't need to cancel every scrimmage and every time playing against each other when something like this happens, because sometimes it's just impossible to avoid injuries when you're playing sports. It's an unfortunate side effect of this stuff, and it sucks for Elmarko. So let's talk more about the injury, what it means for KU on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Be part of the party. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Continuing on with this bonus episode of Locked on Jayhawks, what this means for Elmarko Jackson, and then we'll get into what it means for KU as a team. I mean, absolutely gutted for Elmarko Jackson. Everything that I have been told, that I've interacted with when I was working with Rock Chalk Sports Talk and, doing more of the press conference type stuff every day, Elmarko seemed to be, and every interaction I had, a really good kid and somebody who, you get different levels of athlete, and there's no right and wrong level of things, but there have been, some athletes who have come through KU and played basketball, and they are cocky, to say the least. Elmarko Jackson never really got that type of feel from him, that he was more of just kind of a smart, level-headed, kind-hearted person. And so you hate to see this happen to a kid like that. I mean, you hate to see it happen to anybody in general, but especially after the struggles he did have last season. Like, objectively, last season was not everything that you hoped it was going to live up for. And I'm sure that was from, all parties involved. But I was part of the camp that thought he was going to have a good bounce back season this year. Now, what that exactly meant, because KU has DeJuan Harris and Zeke Mayo and Ryland Griffin and all these players, my kind of expectation was 15 to 20 minute per game a night on what could be a really good team, but showing enough flashes in those 15 to 20 minutes that makes you think that the following year, when DeJuan and Zeke graduate, that Elmarko Jackson could be like a guy come year 3 and make some good impacts. And kind of the guy I compared it to was Jaden Bradley, who was a transfer from Alabama, went to Arizona this past season. And he was playing 20 minutes a night, basically off the bench. He's a good athletic point guard off the bench. Showed some really awesome flashes that now this year I'm like, okay, Jaden Bradley is going to be like all Pac-12 for Arizona this year. And I could have seen that happening for Elmarko Jackson this past season. So it's obviously unfortunate for him. And now it's not just like, oh, well, now you'll just, take a year off, and then year 3, you're going to be ready to still make that jump. You have to overcome some of this injury stuff that, for some guys, they come back fully healthy and they come back better. Some guys, they don't come back the same. And you hope that Elmarko can come back the same. The positive way to spin this is hopefully he, by, getting to sitting the sidelines for a year, basically. We all know that Elmarko has the physical gifts. He has the athleticism. He has the leaping ability. He has the speed and the quickness that you're looking for. I mean, at like 6'2", 6'3", he's on the taller end. I'd imagine he has a big wingspan as far as when you're looking at some of the Bill Self combo guards and point guards that have come through the system. He has all the physical stuff. It was just about the game slowing down for him, which maybe it was going to this year anyway. And the IQ part of the basketball IQ part of the game, something that he had only been playing organized basketball for like 3 years, that he figured was going to come, but he just needed more reps. Well, maybe a year where he can kind of sit on the sidelines and watch some stuff and watch more tape, I guess, and be almost like an assistant coach for the team. Maybe that'll actually allow his mental side of the game to grow and catch up to some of those physical skills, that when he does come back, he'll have the perfect blend of those two things. Like, that's the positive way to look at this. And I think that's the hope of what comes of this. You just hope that the injury doesn't affect that athleticism that he does have. The good news is, by it being 12 months, that would mean he'd be back to full basketball activities if all is on schedule by next June. So then you do have the full off season to ramp up into the season, as opposed to it being like, oh, he's going to be out till next August, and then he has to, start doing boot camp like right away or something like that. No, that's not going to be the case. So that is the good news, and that would be the positive spin here. And I hope it does have a strong recovery for Elmarko, because I still am buying into Elmarko being a real player for KU at some point down the road. Hopefully this is just a delay and not the stop button. All right, let's continue on what it means for KU on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can bet on the Dallas Mavericks as the underdog. They're getting 6.5 points, over plus 200 on the money line. You can bet on the Celtics if you want to go with the favorite. You can bet on player props from the game. You want to bet on some futures for KU to win over 8.5 games, or to make the college football playoff, or to win the Big 12, or Jalen Daniels at 30 to 1 to win the Heisman. You can get in on those too. How about the Royals They've been hot right now. Just bet on them when Seth Lugo starts. Boom, you're good to go. You can do all that at FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Finishing up on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and keep in mind we will have another episode deep diving, talking more about the transfer edition of Mississippi State guard Shakeel Moore. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you to the everydayers who are already going to tune into each and every one of those. And again, you can find that anywhere you get your podcast or by liking and subscribing here on our YouTube page. So just like that with the Elmarko news, all of a sudden Kansas went from feeling like you were pretty deep and everything to feeling like you weren't super deep, to feeling like, oh no, how many guys do you really have for the rotation? You only have at this point 11 scholarship players. If Elmarko is not going to be able to play, that's really only 10 active ones that you can have. But they got to commit, obviously, in Shakeel Moore of Mississippi State. So that'll add to the guard room for them. That'll add to the ball handling room, because without Elmarko, you were down to just DeJuan Harris and Zeke Mayo, which honestly, those two guys could, if they wanted to, cannibalize all the minutes at kind of the 1 and 2, especially with Rylan Griffin too, which would make you fine, but you're kind of a rolled ankle or a foul out or a sickness or flu bug or whatever from being way too thin there for a game or a stretch of games or whatever it is, that you needed more depth. And without Elmarko, you lose some of that peace of mind. You gain some of it back with Shakeel Moore, which is certainly a good thing for KU. And without Elmarko, it's one less guy you could have competing or feel like we're really stuck in that top 7 or 8 in the rotation if you're KU. Which obviously ended up leading to adding Shakeel Moore just hours after the news was announced with Elmarko Jackson. But I think elsewhere, this might have the biggest impact for KU on Rakese Passmore, because if you view it from a standpoint of, okay, Elmarko to me was going to be in that 8-man rotation, like the way I view it, you have DeJuan Harris, Hunter Dickinson, AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin, KJ Adams, Zeke Mayo. You've got your backup center position, whether that's Zach or Flory. You could say both of them are going to be the rotation, whatever it is. I feel like Elmarko would have been in that 8-man rotation. And so if you're taking that away, all of a sudden you feel like, okay, that's 7 guys instead of 8. Now, again, maybe you want to add Flory and Zach, so you have 2 of them as opposed to just 1 of them, and then that would be 8. But still, that means there's more minutes available. There's that 1 extra spot available. Could that be Rakese Passmore? Could that be Shakeel Moore, who you just brought in? Could you still play a 9-man rotation and it be both of those guys? I think this just leaves even more minutes open, though, for Passmore, who did seem to impress in the camp scrimmage based on, what people that I read and, whatever, we're saying. So again, like, take that stuff with a grain of salt, because this happens every year, but seems like a lot of people were high on Rakese Passmore coming in anyway. So maybe this does give the avenue for him to be a part of that rotation in kind of a very real way. What a wild turn, honestly, for LeBaron Philon at this point, because he would have, KU probably just, if they have still LeBaron Philon, do they even bring on Shakeel Moore at this point in time? Like, maybe they still do to add even more depth, but like, Philon would be looking at, maybe he'd be in that rotation. And now at this point, like, he's sitting there at Alabama and it's like, oh, Mark Sears decided to come back and this guy decided to come back and they added all these transfers. Like, he might get less playing time at Alabama than he was expected to get at Kansas. So certainly interesting, but offseason decisions still to be had now for KU. They've already tacked on more. It does bring KU to 12 scholarship players. That means they could still add 1 more if they wanted to. And there's decisions now with the red shirt, like with Elmarko Jackson basically having to take a medical red shirt now. I think already they were planning on redshirting Noah Shelby. They were planning on probably redshirting Jamari McDowell. I don't know that that one was certain, but certainly that one would make sense. Now with the Elmarko news, do you not redshirt one of those 2? You know what I mean? Just so you have an extra player. Or if you do add a 13th scholarship player, do you continue to do that? Lots of offseason decisions that have to still be in motion now for KU. So you can check out that episode talking about what KU got and Shakeel Moore into the program as well, right here with Locked On Jayhawks. That'll do it for this episode of the show. And we'll be back. We will not have a Football Friday episode this week. I will be at a wedding, and that'll be enjoyable for me. But we'll be back at it next week for another edition of Locked On Jayhawks, barring any breaking news. We'll see you then with another edition of LOJ. Later.